Okay, hello everyone. Thanks for the invitation. It's nice to be here. My name is Jaana Simola, and I'm a psychologist, so I did my master's and PhD in psychology here at Department of Psychology in University of Helsinki, and currently I work at the Helsinki Collegium for Advanced Studies. And something funky happened with my slide. I didn't plan it this way. But the title is the same, When Attention Wanders, Neurocognitive Basis of Fluctuations in Attention. And it's the title of this talk, but also like a broader research interest for me at the moment. And what it means in a more simplistic way is that I'm interested in studying different attentional states. And what do I mean by attentional states? Here is a schematic of 4 different attentional states that show the relationship between task-related attentional focus and self-generated thought. So here on the top left, we have a case when the participant is fully focused on the task and the content of thought are those that arise from the task and from the sensory input that is presented on the computer monitor while participant is doing this task. Whereas on the bottom left, we have a scenario when thoughts are also related to the task, but not to the stimulus, but not to the task. So we have a self-generated state. But the stimulus itself does not necessitate this kind of thinking. On the top right, there's a situation when the participant gets distracted by a noise. So this is a case when attention is stimulus-driven, but not related to the task. Whereas on the bottom right, the participant has fully disengaged from the task and is thinking about an upcoming holiday. So it's a case when thinking is totally self-generated and has nothing to do with the computer task. So yeah, I think this is an easy idea to grasp. We all have these experiences from our everyday life when we, for example, try to read a paper or write an essay. We have moments when it's hard to focus on the task and we enter into these self-generated states and start to mind wander. So it's easy to understand what is meant by attentional states, but it's actually not so easy to study the switches between these states, because a standard way in psychology is to present stimuli to people and then record their responses. But the self-generated states are spontaneous and we don't have like a record of when it happens. So, and maybe that's why there's a gap in research. So mostly researchers consider when attention is being studied, it's considered that the participant is only thinking about the task and nothing else. But actually, like, research shows that we spend about half of our waking state in these self-generated modes of attention. So, and the theories of attention so far don't take these into account as much as the stimulus-related attention. It's a new topic, but not entirely new. So this has been around from the early 2000s, and there's a growing interest these days on the topic of mind wandering and self-generated attentional states. So how can we then investigate these states? Here's a figure that describes different methodologies to study attentional states in a laboratory setting. And these techniques allow researchers to have some experimental control over what the participant is thinking. And one way in which attentional states can be manipulated is through induction of psychological states that alter attention or the mental content of self-generated thought during the experience. So in the top left corner, there's a situation when the participant is induced with social stress by asking the participant to do some public speaking. So perhaps this is a situation when they cannot mind wander as much as they can in the case in the middle, when there's a very boring laboratory computer task, which is more conducive to mind wandering than the public speaking, for example. And we can manipulate the complexity of the external tasks and try to change the amount of time that participants spend in the task unrelated thoughts. So there's an example of two tasks. One of them is easier than the other one, and the participants report more self-generated task unrelated thought in the easy task. So these are different ways how we can induce these states, and these are the ways how different states can be recorded from participants' behavior. And we can use these techniques to measure attentional states. We can either use experience sampling, so we can ask participants what they were thinking online by interrupting the task behavior and asking, for example, if they were attending the task or if they were thinking about something else. Or we can, after they have performed the computer task, we can ask them to fill in a questionnaire about the content of their thought during the experiment. But then we can also use these neurocognitive measures while they are performing the task. And here are some examples. For example, the blood oxygen level dependent bolt signal that can be obtained from functional magnetic resonance imaging. We can use EEG or MEG, or one way to study this issue is to look at how the pupil size dilates. So in this example here, there is the incorrect responses in red and correct responses in black. And in the case of the incorrect responses, the pupil dilates more. So perhaps this indicates that the participant was not being as attentive as in the correct case, and therefore we get this pupillary response of a state of attention. So my research interests are to look at fluctuations between these different states of attention, and to also look at the correlations between self-reported attentional states and the neurocognitive traces or signatures of these states. And I'm also a little bit interested about the relationship between attentional fluctuations and creativity. And the methods I use in my research are a magnetoencephalography, similar to EEG, electroencephalography, but this technique measures the magnetic fields produced by the electric currents of the neurons. And I also use pupillometry, so we're recording pupil size while people are performing different tasks. And we are using tasks because we want to control the external stimulus, so we want to know what the people, how they perform and what they see, for example, on the screen. And next I will present two examples from my previous study and from an ongoing study related to this topic. So here's an example from a paper that came out 2 years ago. So we asked participants to perform a very simple go-no-go task. So whenever the stimulus was blue, the so-called go stimulus, participants were supposed to press a button. And whenever they saw a yellow stimulus, they were supposed to inhibit the button press. And we recorded two types of errors. So omission would be the case when the stimulus was blue, but the participant did not respond. And commission would be a case when they erroneously responded to a yellow stimulus. And this looks very easy, but actually, like, we asked participants to perform this for almost 20 minutes, and the blue stimuli were more common than the yellow ones, so they became habituated to pressing the button, and it was somewhat difficult to inhibit the responses for the yellow ones. And I have two examples from two participants from their reaction times, so from the time from the stimulus onset until they press the button. And these are time series of the response times for the correct go responses. And we can already, by eyeballing and by looking at these time series, we can see some differences between participants. And the one on the bottom top row seems to fluctuate more. So there are these like slow oscillations, if you like. So there are periods when long response times are tend to be followed by other long response times, and the same goes with the faster response times. Whereas the participant in the bottom row has more like a random pattern in response times. And what we showed is that there's a correlation. So the more participants had this slow frequency fluctuation pattern, which is described by the beta thing here on the x-axis, the better they performed. So there was a negative correlation between the number of errors and the fluctuation. So it seems that this sort of fluctuation in behavior is beneficial for performance, at least in this type of task. And here's the second example. It's an ongoing study, and this data was collected by Cognitio et al. At University of York, UK. And they had participants perform this task, which is shown here. So there are a series of non-targets that were basically pairs of shapes separated by a vertical line. And in the zero-back condition, whenever they saw the target, so there was this small shape in the middle, they were supposed to respond if this shape matches the shape on the left or on the right. And this is very easy because they have all the information available when they see the target, and they can just compare the shapes. Whereas in the one-back condition, they are supposed to memorize on which side the small target in the middle was on the previous trial. So they have to keep track with the location of the shapes in their mind. And this task has been used a lot, and they have shown in York that in the zero-back condition, people have more time to enter into the self-generated and mind-wandering state because they don't really have to focus so much on the task. And down here I have the pupil size fluctuations from one participant performing this task for almost 15 minutes. And the orange and the white blocks are correspond to the zero-back and to the one-back conditions. And here we also see that the pupil size fluctuates. So we have like, it starts from a bit larger, then it goes smaller, then it becomes larger again. And we are again compared this fluctuation measure beta with participants' self-reported thought contents. And what we show here is that the level of detail in self-reported thoughts correlates with this fluctuation. So the more they fluctuated, the less detail they reported, or their thoughts were sort of vague and not so specific. So yeah, this is two examples from my studies, and I'm actually currently collecting data, so if any of you are interested in participating in an experiment, send me an email and I will let you know about the details of the study. Thank you.